Hey, paisanos! My name is Mike, and this is the Bored Cyborg. Now come over here and give me a kiss on the cheek before I crack your f***ing kneecaps. Welcome back to yet another episode. Today, in honor of Martin Scorsese's The Irishman dropping here in a couple days, I am going to be counting down my top 10 favorite gangster flicks of all time. Now, I do have 5 honorable mentions as per usual. Let's not waste any more time and jump right into it. I'd love to know what your top 10 gangster films looks like, so feel free to leave that in the comments below, and we could little. Alright, so I do have a few rules here. This is just my list. These are just my rules. First, the protagonist or protagonists has to be a gangster. There could be a protagonist cop and a protagonist gangster, but there has to be a gangster as the lead character. Second, no Tarantino. I'm just leaving him out because he conflicts with the other rules of mine, which are, it has to be organized crime, an organized crime organization. So the Yakuza, the Mafia, the Irish Mob, the Triads, etc., etc. So this list isn't going to have hitmen or thieves. It's going to focus on the gangsters. So gangster flicks through and through. Let's get right into it. My first honorable mention is definitely a gangster flick. It has thieves, it has hitmen, but all these guys are pretty much gangsters. So I'm kind of breaking my own rule, I guess. I don't know. It was a hard list to devise. Snatch. This is definitely, it is more of a heist film in a lot of ways, but it follows so many different groups of different kinds of gangsters, different skills, different levels of gangster, and I had to include Snatch because it's such a fun flick. Guy Ritchie really coming into his own with Snatch after Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, which is incredible as well. But Snatch, I love. Had to mention this as an honorable mention. Next up is a film I haven't seen in years and haven't seen this special edition, but it left an impression when I did watch it years and years ago. That is Once Upon a Time in America, directed by Sergio Leone. In fact, his last directed film. This movie blew me away when I saw it. It is a crime gangster epic. It follows a group of kids who grow up in New York City, Jewish kids, I should say, who grow up in New York City. It's a coming-of-age story that follows them into their adulthood and into their gangsterdom, becoming gangsters, low-level criminals trying to work their way up in the ranks. So it's a really great film. Like I said, it's a sweeping period piece epic, and I love it. Just haven't seen it in a really long time. I didn't have time to rewatch it for this list because the special edition is over 4 hours, the extended edition, but I do love this film. Had to give it an honorable mention. Next up, man, this film would be higher on my list if it wasn't for one thing about it, which I'll discuss in a second. That is Scorsese's Casino. Casino is fantastic. I love Casino. I really do. But it's hard for me to watch because of a particular scene during the third act where Joe Pesci's character and his brother are beaten and buried alive with aluminum baseball bats in a cornfield. If you've seen it, you know the scene. It is starkly disturbing. It always makes me feel uncomfortable. It is one of the most realistic scenes I've ever seen in any film. And I know it goes back to when I saw it at like 13 or 14. It just scarred me. It scarred me. And now those sounds, I can hear them resonating in my mind. And the sounds of the aluminum hitting the craniums. And just Joe Pesci begging for his brother's life. It's awful. But it's really Scorsese showing you what it means to be a gangster. It's an ugly life. You don't want it. Casino is incredible. But that scene really fucks me up. Love Casino, though. Next up is another one that I'm so fond of, going back to my childhood. One of the earliest examples of a gangster film that I saw. My buddy Dom and I were huge fans of this one. That is A Bronx Tale. In fact, my buddy Dom introduced this to me when we were very young. And it follows a few characters. Now, this is notable because it's Robert De Niro's directorial debut, and he does a fine job with this film, and I would have loved to see him direct more, but he plays the father to a young boy named Calogero, who is on the streets of New York. He's trying to find his way. He's coming of age, and he's getting sort of roped into crime by this, basically a Don, one of the bosses, Chaz Palminteri. And so it's this sort of push-pull thing where the father is trying to keep him away from the crime. Chaz Palminteri, who's acting as a father figure, is trying to pull him into crime. It's a great film. I love A Bronx Tale. I gotta get this on Blu-ray. I think it's overseas on Blu-ray, but gotta check it out on Blu-ray at some point. Next up, my last honorable mention is Boys in the Hood. How can you have a gangster flick list without mentioning Boys in the Hood? Now, this kind of breaks one of my rules because they're not in a gang particularly. Some of them are gangsters, some of them are not. Some just get caught up in the gangster lifestyle. You know, Ice Cube's character, for example, is the gung-ho sort of character. These two are trying to sort of find their way. And you know they aren't really cut out for this crime life. But Boys in the Hood has a lot to say about growing up in the hood. It's an iconic film. John Singleton, rest in peace. This is his masterpiece. It'll be watched generations on. It is fantastic, and I've yet to see it on Blu-ray. This is a recent pickup, so pretty cool. Boys in the Hood. Alright, so my number 10 is a film that catapulted my love for the genre of gangster films, and as some of you may know, I grew up watching gangster films. When I was around 12 or 13, I started watching these films on my own, and feeling very adult and into the mafia sort of aura, lifestyle thing in cinema, and I really dug it. But this film, paired with my love for hip-hop, this was such an important film while I was growing up in middle school and high school. Everybody talked about this film. It was very hip-hop. The rappers at the time were all referencing this movie, and you know, so I got roped into all of that for sure, but when I sat down and watched the film, I absolutely fell in love with it, and every time I do, up until this day, I am wowed. I'm in awe as to how great of a gangster flick this is. Cuban Man, played by Al Pacino, Tony Montana, of course, starts with nothing, comes over from Cuba, has nothing, and he works his way up in the crime ranks in Miami, in the cocaine dealing ranks, in the criminal enterprises, and he works his way up, and everybody knows how it ends, and it's one of those epic stories of a gangster from his beginning, rise, and fall. It is a quintessential story in that sense, and Pacino is inimitable in this role. It's incredible. Scarface is one of the best gangster movies ever made. Brian De Palma. Love this movie. All these are so nostalgic for me, guys. You gotta understand, I was a huge fan of this genre when I was growing up. It really helped me look at cinema as art. And Scorsese was one of the big ones who helped me do that. And The Departed, man. When this came out, I was probably like 18 or something. I was so pumped for it. I was waiting for it. I was checking IMDb every other day to see any updates and everything like that. And I loved The Departed when it came out. Love it to this day. Granted, I haven't seen it in a good 5 years or so, but every time I watch it, I love it a little bit more and more. It is such an intricate spider's web of deception and deceit. You know, it follows Leonardo DiCaprio's character, who's a cop, undercover in the mafia, and then it follows Matt Damon, who's a gangster undercover for the cops. So it's this, and of course everybody knows it's based on Infernal Affairs, the Chinese film, which I do really like, but I do prefer the American one. And it's just this convoluted story, and it has so many tense moments where you as the audience know what's going on with our two main characters, but the characters in the film don't, and it creates so many suspenseful sequences. It's all about nobody is safe in the end. Anybody could get it, and that's what's so cool about this film. So many people just die like that out of nowhere that you don't see coming. Pre-Game of Thrones, and The Departed is fantastic, one of Scorsese's best, and one of the best gangster films ever made. My number 9. Next up, my number 8 is another nostalgic one. The Coen Brothers' Miller's Crossing. This is an Irish mob film that follows a mob boss and his advisor as they sort of fall in love with the same woman, which causes all these quakes to happen within the crime family. And things get complex as it goes along. And our main character, Gabriel Byrne, is trying to navigate his way through this without getting whacked. But we always feel for Gabriel Byrne's character. That's what's really cool. Now, Albert Finney plays the Irish mob boss, who is incredible in this role. He's not in it too much, but when he is, he really takes control of the scenes. And there's a scene where they try to whack him, and he's not going down easy at all. He's got a Tommy gun. He's just mowing them down. It's incredible. It's a really great gangster film. Coen Brothers doing gangster and doing it damn well, better than most. Funny story, my mom, I actually recommended this to my mom. She's Irish. I guess as a kid I was like, Irish, she'll love it. She thought it was the most boring movie in existence, so you know, to each his own. I love Miller's Crossing, hence why it's my number 8. Next up, my number 7 is Cronenberg getting into the ring with gangster flicks. Man, when this came out, it blew my mind. I had no idea that Cronenberg had it in him to give us one of the best gangster films ever made. That's right, Viggo Mortensen and Eastern Promises. This is just a phenomenal gangster film. It starts with a young woman, who is killed, and they find her diary, basically, which exposes some Russian gangsters, high-level Russian gangsters in the Russian mob, of raping her and impregnating her. This goes to a midwife. Her name is, I forget what her name is, but it's played by Naomi Watts. And as she reads it, she learns more and more about this character who has passed. And Viggo Mortensen's character sort of comes into play this way as they spark up a friendship, possibly something more. But it's really a story about Naomi Watts' character trying to bring justice for this girl who was killed. So many great twists and turns. This one will certainly catch you by surprise if you've never seen it. It's got some great action scenes, especially one that takes place in a bathhouse with mist everywhere and a completely nude Viggo Mortensen with some sort of a switchblade doing work, I will say. It's a phenomenal action sequence that is just shot so smoothly. I love this movie. My number 7 is Eastern Promises. My number 6, I love this movie too. I love all these movies, guys. Number 6 is another Irish gangster film that is State of Grace. This is the quintessential Irish gangster film. I love this movie. Can't really talk too much about it without spoiling it, but what I'll say is it follows Sean Penn's character, who comes back to his neighborhood in Hell's Kitchen after a long absence and reunites with his old team, his old crew, his old Irish gangster crew, which is headed by Ed Harris and his son, Gary Oldman. Gary Oldman is so phenomenal in this. He plays Jackie, I think, Flannery. He's the loose cannon, right? There's always a loose cannon in these gangster flicks, and he's the crazy one who just goes up to people and just blows their faces off just for living. And such an excellent character, excellent performance. But Sean Penn is really what holds this film together. His character is so deep and so nuanced, and as time goes on, you realize more and more how deep his character is, with a lot of twists and turns that happen. Not going to say too much, but I'll say this culminates in one of the finest slow-motion action shootouts, I should say, I've ever seen. It should take like 10 seconds, but it's drawn out to 1 minute to 2 minutes, and it's so tense, it keeps you on the edge of your seat because you're like, oh, that bullet just missed. That one's going to get him. Oh, shit, no. And you're just like, it's all super slow motion, so you're just on the edge of your seat while it's taking place. It's phenomenal. The stakes are high. It's wonderful. State of Grace is my number 6. Now we've got a heavy hitter for my number 5. A film that definitely deserves to be here. You all saw it coming. The Godfather. The original Godfather. I don't even know what to say about The Godfather, honestly. I saw this film when I was a kid. I was 13, 14 years old when I was getting into all this stuff, and it absolutely blew me away. The cinematography, the black. When I think of The Godfather, I think of the color black and the space that is accentuated with blackness. You know, there'll be sort of a profile view of somebody and just stark blackness around them. And it really has this encroaching doom sort of feel to it, to the cinematography, and I adore it. Everybody knows the story about a reluctant war hero played by Pacino who is finds himself getting sucked into the criminal underworld that is headed by his father, Vito Corleone, which is, Marlon Brando in one of the most iconic roles ever on screen. So everybody knows The Godfather. I'm not going to talk about it too deeply, but it's just the quintessential gangster film, man. The Godfather is the first thing that comes to mind when you talk about mafia films. It's one of the first of its kind. It spawned basically all the films that I'm talking about here right now. So, love this movie. Francis Ford Coppola, The Godfather. Give your Uncle Johnny a kiss on the lips. Come on. You don't want to kiss me on the lips? Come on. What are you doing? Come on. Come on. My number 4 is probably going to be one that not many people have heard of. In fact, my number 4 and my number 3, which is cool because I can potentially expose you to two of the greatest gangster flicks ever made. Ever made. My number 4 is Exiled. directed by Johnny To. This is Johnny To's best film, hands down. This is one of the finest gangster flicks, most stylish gangster flicks, most elegant gangster flicks ever made. So the story opens up with two sets of gangsters converging on the same target. One of them is there to protect him, the other is there to kill him, to assassinate him. And this is a very important ex-gangster sort of figure who is caught up in the middle of things. So the whole group now, the group that wants to kill him, the group that's there to help him, and the man himself, basically the man himself says, please, let me have some dignity and do one last job so I could secure the future of my son and my wife. And so what ends up happening is they all start to form a bond, a very brotherly, very manly bond. It is very much a masculine sort of film. And they all end up bonding throughout this film and evading these other groups of gangsters who are trying to get them. And it's such a unique gangster flick, unique Chinese gangster flick of the like that only the Chinese could bring us. Now, what really sets this one apart for me is the character work, the character development. You care about each and every one of these individuals, and as time goes on, they get to know each other more, and we get to know them, and you really connect with them. Look, I have goosebumps, hair sticking up on my arms like crazy. It is such a beautiful story, and what accentuates and punctuates this film with absolute greatness are the action sequences. Almost all of them are slow motion, the most stylized things you'll ever see. There are jackets swaying in the wind. It's very wuxia. It's very kung fu, but it's gun fu. It's John Woo, but it also has some of the old touch of Zen, wire work sort of aesthetic. That is what makes this film so remarkable. It's one of the most underrated, under-talked about gangster flicks or films in general. This is one of my favorite films of all time. I love this movie. It is perfection, and it doesn't have a Blu-ray in this country, and that pisses me off. If you haven't seen Exiled, check it out, everybody. Check this out. This is the one I could recommend almost over anyone on this list, because I know you've seen those. Exiled, my number 4. Next, my number 3 is another one that most likely a bunch of you haven't heard of. That is Sona Teen. Sona Teen, you could say it however you want. This is Takeshi Kitano at his absolute finest. The man that brought us Violent Cop, Fireworks, and so many other great, poignant gangster flicks. No one does gangster like Kitano. He is the man. They're so unique, so different, so refreshing. And when I saw this going on about 6 or 7 years ago, it blew my mind. Now, this version is sort of a Frankenstein version, because I got this box set overseas from Korea, got this nice slipcover, and then the Bandai release of the film. But this slipcover is just absolute gorgeous. It has a little proverb on the back, the little tagline. The mob put the finger on him, so he gave the finger back, curled tight around a trigger. Kitano's character is Murakawa, and he is sent with his gangster friends to go to this beach residence and quell or mediate a situation that is breaking out between two warring factions, to sort of quell the situation and extinguish it. So that's what he's sent out there to do. What he finds out is that this dispute is pretty trivial, pretty insignificant, and everybody starts to sort of get along and just be friends, and it turns into sort of a buddy vacation film while they're awaiting these instructions from their boss. And what really sets this one apart, this is now a Japanese gangster film, a Yakuza film. The last one was basically triads, but more just a gangster film from China. This one is Japanese, and Asian gangster films just feel different, guys. If you haven't watched one, you really owe it to yourself to do so, because this is up there. As you could see, I'd put this film above The Godfather. So that tells you how much I love this film. This film has so much heart. It is so poignant. It has so much to say about the human beings that get caught up in gangsterdom, in the mafia lifestyle. Because at the heart of it, these are just lost, confused, tired human beings a lot of the time. And this one explores those ideas, and it's just a wonderful film. It'll make you laugh, it'll make you cry, it'll horrify you, it'll excite you. That is Sona Teen. Now, Sona Teen was ahead of The Godfather, but it is not ahead of The Godfather II. my number 2. The Godfather II is one of the best gangster films of all time. I sound like a broken record. I should just have a little button that plays that as I go along. The Godfather II takes everything about the first one, continues on. It has the aesthetic of the first one, even more refined. The cinematography, the editing, the score, the narrative structure, everything is so tight, so refined, so perfect. This one I do prefer because it really starts delving into the characters. Michael Corleone, Fredo Corleone. It shows Vito as a youngster, played by, of course, Robert De Niro, which is just wonderful. Again, that is, if it wasn't for those incredible flashbacks that flesh out the story of Vito Corleone and sort of tie into what's going on with Michael, this probably wouldn't be as high as The Godfather. But that is what separates this film. It takes everything that the original does, refines it, makes everything better, and gives us a flashback that stars Robert De Niro as Vito Corleone. You can't go wrong. I'm saying Corleone and Corleone back and forth, but whatever. I love The Godfather 2. It is my number 2. And number 1. Probably know what this is at this point. It's one of the main reasons I got to the point where I wanted to make films for a living. When I was 13, I saw this. I was going through one of the hardest times in my life, personally. This film helped me navigate those times. It was a very special film, a film that still moves me to this day, a film that I have a different, I view through a different lens now. Back in the day, I glorified it. Now, I understand it. Enough talking. That is Goodfellas. This film has so many incredible sequences. Some of my favorites are the, go home and get your shine box, Tommy. Tommy doesn't like that very much. De Niro goes, you shouldn't really talk to him that way. The guy's like, go get your shine box. And Robert De Niro's like, okay. Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci as Tommy, Ray Liotta as Henry Hill, quintessential mafia, Italian gangster film. You can't go wrong. Scorsese at the top of his game. This is still, to this day, my favorite Scorsese film. And sort of like Scarface, it follows the rise and fall of Henry Hill, the central gangster in this film. It follows him as a kid doing low-level jobs for the mob, working his way up and getting to a point where he's doing the biggest jobs that the mob has to offer. And it's just a fantastic movie. It really shows the perceived elegance of the gangster world, the sleekness of it all, the regalness of it all, but underneath all of that facade is the seedy criminal underworld that Ray Liotta's character finds himself in towards the end of the film. It ain't worth it, folks. It ain't worth it. You may make a few bucks for a few years, but in the long run, it ain't worth it. It'll be your demise. Now, Scorsese does glorify these gangsters, but I think he does that on purpose to show you that when we see their demises, that affects us even more. Like, oh, these guys had it all, and they lost it like that. And I think that's why he glorifies the gangsters in this film, because it makes their demise even more powerful. I love this movie. It is my number 1 gangster film of all time. It's in my top 10 films of all time. It means so much to me nostalgically. I am attached to it, but it is also one hell of a film. Goodfellas. I just want to thank you guys for checking out my top 10 gangster films list in anticipation for The Irishman. This is a film that I've been excited for literally 10 years. Yes, he's been talking about this film for over 10 years. So I'm so excited in fact that I've been revisiting some of these gangster films and bringing you this list. I'd love to know what your list looks like, so feel free to leave that down in the comments below, and we'll get a little... If you did enjoy this video and want to see more videos like it, feel free to give it a thumbs up, and if you're new to the channel and want to see more videos like it, feel free to hit the subscribe button, as well as the little bell for notifications. Anyway guys, I will see you next time. Bored Cyborg, out. And if you mess with him, you're gonna get your kneecaps broken, okay? I tell you that because I mean that. See ya!